Welcome to What the Heck's, your source for Warhammer Underworlds in under 30 final tweaks to your deck that are just gonna make it perfect. I'm your co-host, Davy, and with me I have my well-practiced co-host, Phil. How are you doing, Phil?
Doing all right. Not feeling that well-practiced at the moment.
And I have my maestro of tournament organization, Brian. How are you doing, Brian?
What's up? I returned. The rumors of my death were greatly exaggerated.
Or were they? You may or may not be resurrected. You know, some of those warbands got the resurrection cards. So Phil, examine him. Make sure he doesn't have a raise counter attached to him. No.
Can confirm. No raise counter.
Brian and I are making the same joke. Great minds. For context, it is the 30th of June. There's no news from the Underworld's realm, and that's got to be because AOS 4.0 is upon us. And gents, we were chatting a little bit before the episode started, and that's got to be part of what's going on, right? Like that's got to be part of why we just had so much all at once. They must have been clearing the decks of all releases in order to make room for AOS. But
I would think so.
Yeah,
I do think so.
So we had a whole lot. We'll get some at some point, and that's to be determined. I'm going to detour. Is anyone doing anything with AOS 4? Phil, you doing some Seraphon?
I have looked at it, but that would require pulling out all of my AOS stuff from the hobby closet that needs to be organized desperately, and I feel like it would just make a giant mess for myself. So I think it's going to stay where it is until I can finish getting my hobby room reorganized.
You're a wise man. And Brian, you've been setting up your friendly territory in a new place, right?
Yeah, me and my wife bought a house, so I have to unpack my stuff. I haven't put brush tool model in far too long, and it's causing me some shakes. Cool. But no, Age of Sigmar, I'm sure I'll play some tutorials with my fellow gamers in the area. Yeah, I have some Slaves to Darkness, but not much.
Sounds like I need to make one more attempt to beat you in a painting competition before you manage to get the table set up again.
How dare you?
Yeah.
The funny thing is, like, the warband I played most recently was Thricefold Discord. And I was like, yeah, I should probably get these guys painted up. And all I could hear echoing my head is how many gems you were talking about. I was like,
all the gems.
No, like I'm getting received trauma from Brian on this. Yep. So
the challenge that I'm not sharing is all of the tightrope walking you have to do with all of the chains going across him.
Yeah,
it's funny you mentioned tightrope walking. My daughter has been establishing herself as a true Madison East Sider. She just finished. Well, Slackline, we have one of those. I didn't set it up yet this summer, but she just finished a 1 week camp of a circus camp. So I got to go watch her, and she was able to do some. They only had it about 2 feet off the ground, but she was able to go back and forth on about 10-foot distance of tight wire act.
Braver than I.
Yeah, I was. I'm like, that would blow out both my knees, and I would be. You would be nursing me for the rest of my life. Anyway,
early retirement.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, that's cool Madison stuff. Our main topic for this episode is going to be an entry in our beginner series, and this is how to prep for a tournament. And this is a topic we've touched on before, but not explicitly as an evergreen topic. This is specifically at a request from Zach, who's a listener and a member of our local. And we were just trying to put some out there that, hey, if you got somebody who is getting ready to go to their first event, and they are wondering, like, how am I going to do this? We want you to be able to say, like, go grab this episode and give it a listen. Brian was kind of the brainchild behind one of our previous entries in this, and it actually got a whole lot of traction with the community. So what we just want this to be is a tool in the holster for anybody who's looking to provide options for folks who are looking to do a little bit more. So we call this kind of the beginner series or evergreen series, something that you can use whenever It doesn't matter. So we're not going to get super specific with like the meta of the very moment. We're going to try and make this applicable across a wider scale. We may use examples from what we're working on right now. But again, we're looking to do a broader, more universal vision with this.
Generally, if you've never been to a tournament before, either for Underworlds or any event, we just want to help reduce some of that anxiety and lessen the burden of like, what do I got to do? What do I got to prepare? Am I going to look like a fool? No, just go have fun. That's the key concept here. But we hope to check a few boxes for people who like to be prepared.
Yeah, totally. But before we get to the main topic, of course, we got our usual segment, and that is community shout-outs. And we are going to cover some of the things out there in the community that we really want to draw folks' attention to. I would like to mention Fish Mode, who has the Contender series, and one particularly applicable article most recently was about practice. And that's how to get the most effective practice as you're preparing for an event or just to improve your general play overall. I shout out that particular article, but obviously the entirety of the Contender series is relevant if you are trying to prepare for an event. We've said it before and we'll say it again. Fish Mode's Spent Glory blog is one of the premier articles, premier resources online that you can spend your time consuming content at. It's just excellent, and this particular article is no exception there.
And uniquely, he does the Herculean task of going back and adding and editing and changing his articles so that they remain relevant and evergreen.
Yeah. I wish I could say that he spent so much time creating content that he was not a good player at the game, but that is also not true.
Cite my LVO performance. Dashed upon the rocks by Fish Mode.
I will say with this particular article, if you want to see some real cool folks in that picture, there's one or two or three or four handsome gentlemen pictured along the way here. I think you got Fish and Captain Murder in the foreground, but then there's Aaron and there's Sleek's Bowl. And there's a real good looking fella in a denim blazer a little further back. Who could that be? Who knows?
But I think that's a great highlight for like why you want to go to a tournament is you meet a bunch of people and you make a lot of memories and it's a great time, whether or not you win or lose.
Yeah. To that point, I can just look at this picture and I have played. Of the people I can see, I've played more than half of them in this picture, and I can think of great moments from many of those games, and that's part of the appeal.
Absolutely.
Who's got something else?
Yeah. So another sort of beginner tool episode over on YouTube. If you're a person who likes to consume video content, the Critical Focus channel, he's by Gummy Toot over on the Discord. He's been putting out pretty regular episodes at this point, I feel like. And this one is a video real basic on how to use Underworldsdb, which is one of the deck builders for Underworlds. And I think it's actually a really great idea because we've often had to just direct people to say, oh yeah, go to this website and then we have deck builders that you can use. But it's not always like super obvious that A, those things exist, or B, how to even use them. Like, what are all these different filters? What are the different format filters? Like all this stuff that if you're brand new to the game, it can be good to have just some steps, some walkthroughs. And I think it's the first time I've seen anything like that for any of the deck builders online. So a good one to check out if you're brand new.
Well, and I'll say this, if you're not brand new, it may still be worth your time because for me, like a lot of the functionality of some of these deck builders, because I've been using them for so long, as they innovate and improve their interface, I may still be using it in the old way, right? Like I may be using it like with my old patterns and all that sort of thing, and may not even realize. In fact, I can tell you I don't. As I look through this, or as people mention in passing, like some functionality of Underworldsdb, which is the one I use the most often, I'll be like, I did not even know I could do that. So even if you are not new, it's worth your time to give it a watch, and you may learn something about your your preferred or favorite, or one possibility of the deck builders that you didn't know you could do?
I'm learning about your weaknesses right now. I just need to get you on a tightrope and blow out your knees, and then you're already stuck in your ways when it comes to old programs.
Yeah.
But I will say MCRAT does a great job. It is actually quite intuitive how the interface works, but having a guide to get the basics down and get you rolling, that's a great stop.
100%. Brian, you got anything else for us?
Yeah, so after you listen to this episode, might be a little too late, but the July 7th is the Goonhammer Open in Baltimore. If you want to jump over, if this episode encourages you just to dive right in, then Sunday, July 7th is the Goonhammer Open in Baltimore, Washington Airport Hotel.
Yeah,
And,
that's the day after you hear this episode, if it drops. But I mean, I tell you what, it's worth it. So go make it happen. But tell me more.
Well, the East Coast has a lot of good players over there, so I'm sure there's plenty that could be just like not realizing it's in their neck of the woods. So, it's a 4-round best of 3 tournament, 120-minute round, so 2 hours, which is my preferred. And then, it's a world qualifying event, so you could, on the spur of a moment, you could enter for a chance to win a ticket to Worlds. So best of luck to you. Give it a go.
Speaking of winning a ticket to Worlds, you could come play with us on August the 17th for the Q3 quarter 3 Madtown Throwdown, where we will have one of those tickets on the line. We can promise you that great Madison experience in our meta that we've spent a lot of time working up. We already know several people coming in from out of town, and it's going to be great. And we will have you play a great tournament, and then anytime you can hang out with us outside of that. We promise additional activities, maybe some of our favorite games like Blood on the Clock Tower, some good food, some good meals, or just some good conversation about a game we all love. If you can make it, we'd love to have you. Make your plans, and we'll do whatever we can do to help you accommodate that trip.
I think we have some people that might be willing to travel just to see what you wear to the event.
Oh man, that's putting some pressure on. I've been invited to not one but 2 weddings this fall that are that have a Renaissance Fair theme, which my daughter is very excited about to help me figure out a Ren Fair costume because I don't have one.
Boy.
So are you just upset that they're not doing disco themed? Because I'm sure you have an outfit for that.
Oh, you know it.
It's only a matter of time before that comes back.
Yep. Coming back around again. Well, gents, that talks about the community a little bit. What do you say we get into our main topic here?
Yeah, let's do it.
Fire away.
So we are going to talk to you about tournament prep. The goals of this is to talk about how to decide what to play, setting your goals, figuring out what kind of tournament you're playing. Like, how is it that you go and have the best experience at a tournament or event? You know, because not all of them are tournaments, but how do you go and have your best experience at an event? You know, whether that's your first or your 14th, thing that you've gone to. We're just going to give you some of our tips from having played in many of those about how to make that a good experience for you.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, once you learn that there is an event that is within your range to go to, look at whatever detail page, see if there's contact information for the organizer, and you could just bombard them with questions because I'm sure they're going to tell you exactly what you need to look at and what you need to bring because they want people to come and have a good time. So that's the simplest way. I would just say look for those details and reach out that way. Normally there is links nowadays and player packets that'll tell you that as well. So they might just send you that link as well. But just baseline to start there.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. If it's your very first, then you might not even know what you need to have. If it is not your first, you may have some preconceptions about what an event is, but there's no guarantee that every event is formatted the same. We've talked to people who have played in best of 1, best of 2, best of 3 formats. And so before you can really start planning for it, you really got to figure out what the requirements and parameters are, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think even like figuring that out can also start with a question of like, what do I want to do? What do I want to play in? And then trying to find tournaments that sort of meet that skill level. So like, not just that there is a tournament near me, but it might be that like, I'm really new. I don't want to play something that's like a world's qualifier necessarily, because I don't feel ready for that. And trying to understand, like, is this tournament at the level I'm at so that I feel like I can have a good time? And so maybe even just starting there. But then after that, just being like, okay, what are these formats that they're saying we're playing? How does it work? What are the different requirements of those formats? I know that in the UK at Warhammer World, they do a lot of rivals tournaments, which I have to imagine helps to just be like, anybody can come and play this. That is literally the whole point. Everyone's on the same playing field. Let's just start to get lots of people coming to these tournaments. And then from there, once you're like, hey, I've done this a few times, I kind of know how this works. Maybe you can start looking at, well, maybe I'll do Nemesis, or maybe I'll even try and find a championships tournament, which you might have to travel to Poland or Germany to find, but they exist.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, just even talking about local events for a while during the really initiation of the Nemesis format, we would kind of alternate between championship and Nemesis formats, right. Specifically with the idea of like, hey, we're going to make a format that's more approachable for new players and a format that is available for players who've been playing for a longer time and may want this other option. And I will say all that to the side, like if there is, we talk about, if the format or if the goals of that format, like, having a ticket to the World Championships is on the line, where you might expect people to really be gunning for shooting for the stars. This is a community that is amenable to so many players. Like you should not feel overly intimidated, even if there's a ticket for Worlds online. If this is your first event and there's a ticket for Worlds, you may not be able to get that ticket. You might, but don't say like, oh, well, this is not for me. Like people are going to be trying too hard. Like, because what I've experienced is, 95% of the time, even the people who are really, out to like get to the very top are so willing to spend the time to like make sure that a newer player has a good experience that I would not feel intimidated at all about attempting that. So,
yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think probably more so in Underworlds than any other game I've ever played. Like, there's very few people who are completely cutthroat and are just like, I'm going to do everything and take every advantage and never, let up.
Yeah.
There's very little like, shoot to kill mentality in this game. I feel like people are, even when they're playing to win, are still out to have a good time. I think it just is that people just really love playing this game. And they don't feel the need to like alienate their opponent just because they want to win.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. All of the events and tournaments that I've played in, I've never had one where it was rejecting of new players or balked at that. It's still, we want to grow the game even more. So nobody is trying to turn that away. You should know how the game is played before you go to an event so you can play in a timely manner. You don't want to be learning the game at an event. But I've never I've always gone to an event and there's always been a newer player, and sometimes they surprise everybody with their performance.
Yeah.
I think
sometimes
even in Calgary, there was a player that only been playing for a week, and even at LVO as well, there was a player that had only been playing for a week and they performed very well. So it accepts all ranges of skill and experience.
Yeah, sometimes the greatest story is like the player who has only played Rivals is playing in his first Nemesis format, his or her first Nemesis format, and is just like taking the field by storm. And that could be you, right?
Yeah.
But we talk about this, like we are saying the first thing is to figure out is what are the hard requirements and parameters. So it might be like you have to have a painted warband. You have to be able to play in 2 hours a best of 3, so looking up what the requirements are. Like am I doing best of 1? Am I doing best of 2, best of 3? Do I have to be painted? Am I doing rivals, nemesis, or champs? Like, those are all things to establish before you start forming your own goals. Figure out, is that event right for you? And then from there, once I know this event is right for me, then what are my goals for the event? So, well, let's talk about that. Like, how do you set your goals? Do you guys approach every event with the same goal, or have you approached them with different expectations, and why? What has been the difference between those?
Yeah, I've gone into different events, and a lot of this gets changed and altered or dictated by the level of preparation, or just sometimes life gets busy. You always hope to end up on the podium or even win it, but sometimes setting your expectations can really help you have a better time. So a example that I really like is from Vanguard Tactics. They are all about sportsmanship, and one of the things they say is, when I go to an event, I set out to make, in a 3-round tournament they play in, they say, I'm setting out to make 3 new friends. And I think that's a fantastic baseline, where it's like, that encourages you to have good sportsmanship, and to you to focus on your opponent and play the game and have fun. It is a game. We're playing with toy soldiers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's always a good level set to keep in mind. Of course, then you can set goals from there based on your performance and what you want to do. I think a next level step there is to make less mistakes from each game forward, improving your performance and not caring about whether you win the match or the round or the game, but just making less mistakes, getting fewer timing things wrong, like missing opportunities, making less and less of those mistakes is a surefire way to put you on a path to success and actual better performance in the future. After that, you can then focus on winning more games than you lose, winning more matches than you lose, and then performance-wise, like if you want to be on the podium or top 8, make top cut, make top 8, make the podium, and then win the event.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, that gives pretty much a really good rundown of like all the sort of levels of sort of like tournament performance and tournament attendance. But to answer your question, Davy, I personally have gone into almost every tournament I played with different goals, because the tournaments are all kind of different. For example, when we go to Adepticon, I am usually trying to set goals for myself to say, I want to do better than I did last year, and I would really like to be able to win a Grand Clash, just to say that I've done it at least once. So Adepticon is like a much more high level. I'm trying really hard. I really want to win. Not to the detriment of being a good sport, but the goal is very different than I'm thinking back to, we had a tournament sort of as in-person tournaments were starting again, and it was like kind of intended to be like new people were trying out this new sort of Nemesis thing, kind of before Nemesis was real. And we got a bunch of new people, and I know you and I both brought corn, and I think we both brought the meme cards, and was like, can I score the objectives for like being one fighter alive and all my opponents dead? And I didn't do it, but it was a fun like alternate win con where it was like, I don't care what happens in any of these games, but I want to score this one card. I'm trying to make this happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a concept that I recognize from like 40K stuff, where it's like, I'm getting my butt handed to me, but by God, my moral victory is going to be killing your character and like just changing your whole focus to just achieving that goal. And there's plenty in Underworlds gives plenty of those milestones, like Open the Waking Gate was a crazy combination card goal. And yeah, like you said, the Corn's Chosen, incredible. All kinds of fun you can have.
So I will say, like, a well-designed event will develop some ways to have goals other than just finish at the top of the pile, right? Like it might be, and Skylar has been tremendous for this, where he's like creative special prizes for people who are like the best in their Grand Alliance. And Brian, you helped facilitate Worlds last year, and there was a best in any given faction, right? And so there are awards for that. So like you can say like, all right, I'm going to bring this faction and I'm going to do as well as I can. But what I'd really like to do is be the best destruction team, or I'd be the best, and that may be a factor of like, you may reassess or reevaluate what your goals are along the way. Like, if you pick a warband. So like if I was, I don't know, like I go back to the very first Grand Clash I was part of, and I took Godsworn Hunt, and I might have gone there and been like, I'm going to be the best Godsworn Hunt I can be. And then, or like try and finish top of them. And then I realize I'm the only one. Like, well, I already achieved that. So like, let's see if I can, be like, finish 3-1 or something like that. So just setting a goal at the outset is not the be all end all. You may reevaluate all the time, but I think, and I think I probably speak for most of us here, present and not present on this podcast, when I say like, we can set all these, you can set all these different goals for how you participate in an event, but there's some that are, I would say, almost universal, and that is like, if I go to an event, I want to finish that event, however many games I play, be it 4, 5, 6, 7, if it's a 2-day, let's say it's all the way up to 8. I want to, at the end of that event, say like, I played 8 people who would all be happy to play me again. I want to play against those folks and be able to say that, if there was another event down the line and we ended up setting up across from each other, they'd be excited to do that again. I want them to experience the game that I play against them and go back to there and be like, that was awesome. Like we played real hard. We had great moments. There was great sportsmanship there, and feel invigorated to go back to their whatever their local is and be like, this is the greatest game I've played and I want to grow it. Because here's the reality, like, everyone here has played in, multiple events, everyone on this recording, and that may not be true for you, the listener, but everyone here has played, multiple events, and we've won some and we've lost some. Like, nobody on this podcast has won every event they've played in. Nobody on this podcast has lost every event they've played in. Like that, everybody's had success at some level. And once you wrap your head around the idea that like, hey, there's more to enjoying event than just winning that event. The one thing I can control is like how well I present this event to other people, how well I present this game to other people. Like, I think that's got to be a universal goal for anyone going to an event, is saying like, I'm going to try and make this as good an experience for me and other people as I can. And that's what's going to grow this and make this this game even bigger for other folks down the line.
Yeah, because there's still plenty of luck in this. No matter how much preparation you do, there's obviously the luck of the dice. There's the luck in your card draw order, and then also just by pairing during the event, whether or not you get paired up into your boogeyman, or if you just get an easy win path because you got a bunch of hard counters like that you can have a strong matchup against. Like, there's plenty of luck in this too, so try to make sure that your mind is ready and clear, and you don't have to just weigh whether or not you had a good time based on your performance.
Yeah. So gents, you've set your goals for the event. You know what the event requires, you know what you'd like to get out of the event. What's one of the very next things that you need to be doing?
I think at that point, you're starting to look at what warband do you want to play? How do you want to build for the event? Which is a much bigger question than just which warband do I think is going to be the best. Sometimes that's the question you're going to ask yourself, but that's a tough question to answer. I don't think there's ever been a single consensus, except maybe FLM at one point, as to which warband would be the best one to take. And I think that there's a lot of factors that go into that. And I think the first one is you sort of have to ask yourself, what do I like? What do I enjoy playing in Warhammer Underworlds, and what do I find I'm good at in Warhammer Underworlds? I know as we've had more and more people joining our Discord and people asking about different warbands and like how to play and what to play, we've had these discussions about like, well, here's these options, here's how they play, here's the different play styles, here's what you might like, what might work for you. And people might try some stuff and be like, yep, that seems like it works. I see how it works. Like I think somebody, I don't remember who it was recently talking about trying the new version of Briar Thorns and saying like, yeah, it seemed good and scored glory and was doing well. And I just hated just being passive and sitting around on the objectives, and like it just wasn't what I wanted to be doing. They just wanted to be like charging in and smashing people. So it was like, sometimes you just have to listen to your heart and know that throwing dice and charging is what you really, really need to be doing. And if that's the case, it kind of helps narrow your choices. And so I say all of that to get to the point of saying that you need to find the right choice for you, so that you're going to be able to be doing the play style that best fits your personality, so that there's not like this clash of like, in my head, I'm always wanting to charge when I really should just be sitting back and like drawing a power card.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak personally to that in that I have, there are play styles that appeal to you, and they may rotate, right? Like Phil and I have talked many times about our love for Garrick's Reavers. Like we've both enjoyed that play style at different times. That is often a play style that is like, all speed ahead and damn the consequences. Sometimes I've entered a phase of the game where I'm just not feeling that. And I have to recognize that like some of those warbands then are not super for me. And honestly, I personally tend towards warbands that can try to do counterplay, can try and limit the scores on both sides and just find that edge, find that control play in there. And so if I'm building a warband and find that like that is not available to me, well, maybe that's not the warband for me. That's just recognizing what appeals to you and what you're going to have the most fun with. And sometimes what you'll have the most fun with is in that moment, like finding something outside your comfort zone. You just need to know, like, is this the time where I'm going to expand what I understand as like a fun game, or is this the time where I'm going to kind of stick to the things that I know?
For sure.
Yeah. And I would definitely, I would urge people to stick to what you know. Don't listen to what other people say, like, oh, you're taking that, you should be taking this because this is really strong, or this will be really good. I think this will be really good. It's like, let them do that. Like, let them take that. Yeah. If you end up taking something somebody recommended because they're like, oh, taking this is an auto win. And if you don't like the experience, or as soon as you start hitting road bumps, you're going to start being like, God, I shouldn't have done this. Or like, why did I do this? I took it on an impulse. Yeah. And it's one of my favorite things about this game is nothing fares better in this game than experience and reps and playing that warband, getting the decision-making processes down, and having the repetition to know what the right choice is when it comes nail-bitingly close. Because at the highest levels in a tournament, it is who makes the fewer mistakes and the less of those micro decision errors, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. Like, and some of this comes down to your goals. Like, if we were to talk to Alex, our local, about like what goals is going into an event, it often might be to prove people wrong about Kagras, right? Like
Right. Yeah.
he's going to say like, I'm going to bring Kagras. I don't think they are the warband that has a single best option to, or like single best probability of winning this, but I think that I can surprise people with how well they do. And he's right. Like he, if we look back to LVO, he gave the eventual champion of that event a pretty good scare during the elimination rounds by taking a game off him and then really scaring him in another game. Dice a little bit another way, he comes away with a win. And that is him setting goals for himself and then picking the warband that he wants, that he's most comfortable with, to make that happen.
There is an alternate timeline out there where he might have taken it and shocked the world with a Kagras LVO victory.
Yeah. But I mean, it can be both that way. It can be like, your goal could be to prove that, or it could be like, I'm going to show that I can do something with a warband that I'm not comfortable with, So like I've, some of these folks that have maybe already earned a spot, so like we're going to go to Nova. Skylar's going to participate at Nova. Skylar already has a slot at Worlds. And so he's going to set goals for himself at that event, which are either, it may be like, I'm going to practice what I intend to bring to Worlds and get better at that. Or it could be, like I am going to expand my knowledge of the game by trying a warband that's outside my comfort zone. And it's all about like finding what it is that you want to get out of that event, and then picking the right thing to match that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also important to, in making this decision, start to, if you are already familiar with the game, because we're assuming that there's a wide range of people who might be making these decisions. So like, if this is your first tournament, I would say just play whatever you like and just go for it and have some fun, and don't think too hard about it. If you're somebody who's played a few tournaments and you are starting to like get into the weeds of making these decisions, then obviously you take what we're saying and think about all your possible options and what you're going to have a good time with, and what you think you might have a good showing with. And then sort of that next level of like, sort of what are you thinking about when you're trying to take down like something for a Worlds ticket, where you're going to be playing against really high level competition. You have to be looking for every edge you can get if you want to do something like that. And you might have to look at what you think you're most likely to face and ask yourself, if I play what I want to play, if I play this warband that I've been playing for a while, is there any reason that warband's going to struggle especially hard because of what I think I might face? So for instance, if you're like, I'm playing this, Swarm warband, but I'm expecting there to be Damatan with a ton of pings, that might make things really hard for you. And you might have to think like, if my goal is to try and win this tournament, that may mean that I need to think long and hard about if I can really use that Swarm warband. You might be able to, but you might have to do a lot of practice to find that out. And I think that actually leads to another point about picking these warbands that we didn't mention, but we probably should have even earlier than this, is like, how much time do you have before this tournament? Do you know, is this something that you're like, oh, I just found out about this from, the local game store owner, and they're going to be running this in 2 weeks? Or do I know that this is something that I'm planning for in 5 months, and I'm, really trying to like hone my strategy down to a razor's edge? When you have more time, you can practice a bunch of more things. You can practice into more things, and you can start to figure out like, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Both for the warbands I'm thinking about playing, the warbands I'm thinking I might face, and just me as a person. Like, what are my strengths personally as a player, and what are the things I struggle with? And then starting to try and figure out, how do I work around those things, either with cards or gameplay decisions, or the warbands.
Sure. And I think we talk about that, like when you say how much time before an event, like that's a function of like how much literal time there is between this moment now and an event coming up, and also like how much time do you have available. So like,
Sure. Yeah.
Like 5 months preparation for a person who has, all they can do is, they have as much time as they want to spend on the game is different than somebody who's like, I can play like once every 2 weeks.
Yep.
So
Right.
you're finding that balance.
Also, life has a tendency to throw curveballs. So you might have 5 months, and then suddenly 3 months right in the middle gets taken out by some life event.
Sure.
And hope everything goes well and prioritize well. Don't go to the tournament come hell or high water just because, but you have other priorities.
Mm-hmm.
But if you still find yourself ready to play, suddenly you might be panicking and going like, I had 5 months. Now I only have a month to prepare. What do you do in that situation? Speaking from my own experience, I would recommend going with the warband or deck that you are most practiced with. Even if it's not going to be a contender, you are going to be further investing in experience with that most familiar warband. And like I said, I think that gets the most mileage in this game is what you have the most experience and reps with. And playing that now at a tournament would get a lot more experience and more high mileage experience.
I think I agree in those situations where you've, maybe run out of time and that you don't really want to go into a tournament playing something you're not familiar with, not because it's going to hurt your win-loss chances, but more because I think you might not be as satisfied with your performance because you probably will realize that you've made a bunch of mistakes.
See my Calgary performance. I panicked at the end, chose a warband the Wednesday before the tournament on Saturday, and the whole time I'm thinking this was a mistake. I should have gone with the warband that I'm practiced at.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean that is that balance of like, do I switch to the thing that I think is maybe more powerful? Do I stay with the thing that I'm more familiar with? And that's just an experience thing. And it associates with your goals as well. But I think that's a solid thing that you bring up. But let's say you have, however you've done it, you have settled on your warband. Now it is time to get some reps, get some practice. What do you think of when you're getting those practice games? What do we think of when you're once you're more or less committed to a warband? What are you trying to do once you're locked in?
I think for myself, the first thing that I'm starting to think about when I have a pretty well honed deck and I think I've got all the card choices pretty well ironed out is I'm starting to ask myself, depending on the matchups, and I think this is actually a later step, but what am I looking at in an opening hand? What do I want? What will help me with my game plan? And when do I need to make a mulligan? And how do I know that so that when it happens in a tournament, I don't have to sit there and think about it for 5 minutes?
So I think what I'm hearing, like I would almost put this in a subcategory of a broader thing, which is to part of practice is to find, if not mental shortcuts, then experience with certain aspects of the game. Because there's such a high mental load with this game that you're trying to find things that will reduce that mental load. And that is things that will, at decision points, if you don't have to spend a ton of mental energy to work through these decision points, then you're saving it for later decisions, later micro decisions or macro decisions or choices. And this is kind of a subset of that. But I think this is a great example. That is the mulligan choice.
Yeah. And this is it's a really tough one to try and like give a rule of thumb of like, how do you learn this? Because it's going to differ on every warband and then even beyond that with each pairing that you would have with those warbands. But just to try and give an idea of what I'm talking about. So when I'm playing Starblood Stalkers, for instance, the things that I'm looking for most of the time are like, do I have some easily scored surges to start with? And do I have a way of getting on 3 objectives easily?
Mm-hmm.
If I don't have either of those things, that I don't like that hand most likely. If I have both of those
Sure.
things, I'm great. If I have one or the other, I still probably feel okay. But like it's starting to be like, what does this hand have? Does it meet those needs for this warband? If yes, we're good to go. If no, ditch it. And then, like, if we're in the middle, have to think about a few more things, which we don't need to go into right now, but it's like just to give that idea.
Yeah. Brian, I can see agitating. What do you want to say here?
Did we want to back up a moment and say, like, after you've selected your warband and deck, then your deck building, and because that's a whole process unto itself, and we're focusing on the tournament performance itself and how to prepare. Deck building is a whole nother aspect. Dive into that once you got your deck set and you're not waffling on whether or not I should have this card or that card. You know, things may change and you may make a last minute swap. That's always available. We want to get those practice reps in with the deck. You know every single card in that deck you're cycling. You know exactly what your odds are of drawing the card you need, kind of thing. Because after you got your deck set, then we can focus on reducing the brain burn that you're going to experience during the tournament, which is to say the amount of energy that you're expending with decision making and whether or not this is a good play, whether or not I should do X, Y, or Z in this situation.
Yeah, we're talking about like setting up that starting point, right? Like practice is going to inform any changes you make, and Skylar would probably burn us alive if we didn't mention his one of his preferred methods, which is, if you are playing the Nemesis format where you're playing a warband deck plus one other Universal Rivals deck, play at least one game with just your warband cards and one game with just the universal cards, just so you get introduced to all the cards you can possibly use, so that you can keep those in mind as you go through this practice and say like, this card has kind of been a dud for me. Let me take a look back at what else might be available, or this one's been hot fire. If you're doing that one thing, like, but I didn't include it in my original build, what could I possibly cut? So the deck building thing, like, you're going to have a starting point and then kind of drill in from there.
Yeah. Doing those rivals matches can help shake up the preconceived notions you might have settled on, like that card's dead to me. But playing through with just the rivals decks makes you reconsider every single one, because sometimes they can be a struggle to use, and then it might enlighten you to a opportunity you hadn't seen before. I think Skylar would also burn us at the stake if we didn't mention What the Decks, a great resource for building your deck. But yeah, that goes amongst our how to deck build episodes, not necessarily what diving in here.
So we've talked a couple times now about reducing the mental load, and I think that is a huge part about preparing for an event. So I'm going to give an example at the very basic level, and that my son is going to be participating in Q3, and he's going to road trip out with us to Nova, and so, like, we're talking about like his goals. Like, his goals are to play all his games, be able to like competently, run his warband, to make sure that his opponents get a good game, get a full game out of it. And so we are picking warbands that have warbands and pairings that have like minimize that mental load, which means that he's already familiar with them, that don't have too many decision points. He was super interested in Hexbane's Hunters, but like we played a little bit with them and like, man, there are just so many reactions and choices that is a pretty complicated warband for somebody to run. So we're going to back it off and pick a warband that he's already really familiar with, and has some, I won't say easier choices, but fewer points where you have to decide on it, like the fewer decision points, basically.
Yeah, I think a good example of this decision point spectrum would be Iron Souls Condemners, which are 3 Stormcast charging, versus Exile Dead. at the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, very much so.
What other ways can we reduce that mental load? And I think this is whether you are a new player or an advanced player. What are you doing to reduce that mental load?
Yeah. So now that you've sort of gotten your deck in your head and you kind of know what you're doing and you're trying to figure out what your best opening hands are going to look like, you now need to start thinking about what are the factors for where I put my fighters and what boards help with what how I want to be deploying my fighters. So that's sort of two parts to the same, or two decision points in the same like idea of like,
this can often be referred to as turn zero, just game setup.
Yeah. And so I think a really good way to think about this is, what is my main game plan and how do I need to work with that game plan against my opponent? So for instance, I'm playing Garrick's Reavers and I know that I have multiple cards that say I need to be charging and I need to do a certain number of charges and make a certain number of attacks or whatever. And if I'm going to want to be able to effectively do that in every round of the game, that means that I need to set myself up in a position where I can actually make all those charges on turn one, which might mean that I need to make sure that I have a board in the 3 board choices that I'm allowed in the tournament or per game in the match.
Assuming we're doing best of 3.
Yeah,
right?
Assuming we're doing best of 3. Otherwise, you might just have to pick one per just that game, is you're not going to be limited. But knowing which boards you think are like your go-tos, where you're like, okay, I'm playing against a fairly passive warband that might make it more difficult for me to make those charges. How do I pick a board that allows for me to still get there, even if, my opponent's lined up really far away from me? And so you kind of can start by, at least what I do is I'll with the warband that I'm intending to play, I will look at all the legal boards, just sort of lay them out or look at them online. There's in Underworldsdb and other places, you can have just digital images of all the boards and just look at the distribution of all the starting hexes and start to ask yourself, if I'm the aggressor, where do I want to be? If I'm playing defensively, where do I want to be? If I'm having a full offset, if I'm having a long board, like all of these things you can kind of just practice in your head before you ever sit down and play a game. And so when you look across at your opponent's warband and you're like, I'm 90% certain that's what they're going to be doing, you then can narrow that choice of boards from, what is it, like 16? 20. All the way down to like 3.
But why?
Yeah, like I think it's a good idea to, because in a best of 3, which would be the most amount of boards that you're going to see in a match against a single opponent, I think it's a good practice to have 2 boards that you are comfortable placing first and 2 boards that you're comfortable placing second.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. And so like setting those up and knowing how you're going to deploy on those is a big part of it. But the other piece, and this is the next step I talk about with reducing mental load, and this is the much harder one, is knowing which warband you're going to deploy which way against. And this is knowing the matchups. This is often referred to as who is the beatdown, as in who is the person that has to come and get the other one. So if we are playing a game and, some of us on this podcast have played games that were decided based on we both thought we could stand back. So it's who is the one who has the most passive glory, or who is the one who can afford to wait and will build up their snowball faster passively than the other one. And so figuring out, you've already got your, here's my 2 if I have to come after the opponent, here's my 2 if I can sit back, or how the boards are selected. Knowing when to put which of those into play is real important. And I would say this is the most time intensive of any of those things, because there are so many warbands in the game right now.
Oh yeah.
You can
Over
trim that
50,
down somewhat.
right?
Yeah. You can trim that down somewhat by being fairly confident that people are not bringing, Eyes of the Nine, Steel Hearts, Garrix, like those are ones you may encounter. I can't promise you won't, but they're much less likely that you're going to encounter them than Domitans or Hexbane or whatever.
And a lot of these warbands overlap, so it's not like you have to particularly gear against each one of them. But like Domitans might be very similar to, if you can prepare for Domitans, you probably can prepare for Morgoth's Crushes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So getting some sense of like, if I'm playing against this warband, and then the next level is this warband plus this pairing, like if Phil, your thing that you've been playing a lot of is Skinnerkin, and we were talking about like I've been playing a lot of Zandara's Gravebreakers, and depending on the pairing, that matchup changes a bunch. And so figuring out like, hey, I'm playing Zandara's, that means one thing, but if I'm playing Zandara's plus Fearsome Fortress, it's this. If I'm playing Zandara's plus Hungering Parasite, it's this other very different thing. And understanding how you size up in those is like where you're getting to like the really advanced levels. And if you are somebody, if we were going back all the way to our time restrictions or our goal setting, if your goal setting is to like just really understand your own warband, don't worry about this. Like you're going to learn that. You're going to have some great experience. You're going to have some great games. You're going to have some awesome moments. If your goal is like, hey, I want to take down this field of 32 people, well then you probably need to be putting in the reps to understand like what is the top possibilities to face in the current meta, and understand how you will deploy against those. And that's where a ton of mileage can happen.
I feel the need to save a little face here because you immediately made my example look really silly, because Morgoth's Crushes are nowhere near as versatile as Domitans. So depending on the pairing, I might say that instead I would exchange that for Morgoth's Crushes. If you're prepared for Iron Souls Condemners, you're probably also pretty well prepared for Morgoth's Crushes.
Fair.
Just because Davy made me realize, that was stupid.
If there's anything I can do on this podcast is make Brian feel like he's stupid. So
I will sort of play off of what you're saying though, in that if you're somebody who going into either the whole tournament or a particular matchup and you're like, I don't really know what I'm supposed to do for this deployment, you can just play to what you think your strengths are and do your normal setup and say, well, this is what I think my warband does well, and you put your guys out. And if you are playing a best of three, one thing that I've found really rewarding is going through the best of three, and if it goes to the third game, knowing that like I now have a good sense of what I should or shouldn't be doing in deployment, and I can make adjustments on the fly, and I can deploy differently now because I know what I'm expecting in this matchup. And that's just like one of those fun situations where you're like, being able to play to the third game actually made a difference here. It wasn't like you just get no opportunity to learn from your loss that you had. You can take that and say, I can immediately apply this and then try something different in the game, which is really fun. So not always something I'll get to do, but it is one of those like level up moments, even in the middle of a tournament.
Yeah. One of the things that we've talked about as we talk about this, like reducing your brain burn, reducing the mental load that you have. We're talking about board selection. We're talking about deployment. We're talking about mulligans. Those are all things that happen before the game really starts in earnest, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're looking to maximize your practice time, what you can do is just do those portions, so like Phil and I could set up and say, okay, Phil, you're going to practice with your, I don't know, let's say you're taking Headsman with Hungering Parasite in the current meta.
Sure.
And I will take a variety of different things and we'll say like, all right, we're going to play you against an objective holding thing, so let's say it's Thorns of the Briar Queen with Rime Black Relics. Let's do 2 or 3 deployments. It will be a draw your cards, choose to mulligan, pick your boards, deploy. And before we even play the game, let's just lay out what we got here. We'll show each other our starting hands, talk about starting plays, and you and I can discuss like, hey, this is where we think we're going with this. And we're maybe 15 minutes commitment into this. And we have some of that, like Brian was referring to, the turn 0. We have the turn 0 effect here. And we know we can discuss like, hey, we think you're in a strong position or a weak position, and here's what I might have done different.
Absolutely.
And so you can get kind of a lot of mileage out of that without having to play through all the way through. Because, we've talked about practice games. Skylar's really, what is the term he uses? Limit testing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because even if you do like set up, you just be like, okay, this feels like a mistake, but I say you lucked into a card draw. And you could be like, okay, maybe can I overcome this? If I make a dumb decision in the tournament, can I overcome this? And that would be like limit testing. Yeah. But you don't have to finish out the whole game. Just play through the first round and just be like, okay, yeah, that was bad. And so now don't make that mistake.
Yeah.
But it is good to limit test because it's like it can also show how resilient your deck is. Can it come back? Yeah.
And what Skylar's talking about there is like all the time in an event, you're going to end up in a position where you're not happy about it. Like you are at a 50-50 point or worse. And how do I continue going? Do I just throw my hands up and give up, or do I try to salvage something? And, it might just be I'm trying to salvage glory differential. It might just be I am trying to limit information to the other player to improve my chances in later ones. Those are all valuable things. But if we talk about practice time as a limited resource, sometimes that limit testing is great. Like if we go to our league night, for instance, you could call it quits early, but if there's not another player available, then you haven't really saved anything. So then go ahead and limit test. Otherwise, if you have the opportunity to try multiple setups, or if somebody is available right now, then you can call it. So it's about, if you are looking to like really meet your goals for that event, you may be looking at ways to really maximize your practice time, and that is kind of watching what's available to you, and how can you make the most of what you have available.
And to go along with that, something that at least Davy and I have done before is that, we'll be playing a certain matchup that we know, there's potential weaknesses for, and we'll have rolled off and be like, well, wait a minute. I actually have like a real need of practicing as though I lost this roll, but I won it. Mm-hmm. Let's just pretend that didn't happen and just say, let's just set it up the other way. Just to force the situation, because you need those reps.
Yeah. Sure. For an example too, is if you know that a longboard situation against a certain warband is bad, don't roll the dice for the hope that you don't get that. When you're practicing, give the opponent that bad situation or for you, and do the stress testing during practice. Be like, how do I overcome this now? Don't play, like, for instance, Samurai Razors, Rhymeworm Bite. It can be a very sniper-like deck. And so being able to stress test yourself during practice so that you don't get into the, like, okay, if I can beat them, if I get flush boards, I get board placement. Give your opponent that long board. Test yourself during practice.
Find what works.
Yeah, and it can even be the flip of that. Like, let's say you've already figured out that, like, wow, if I'm longboarded into Siren Eyes with Rhymeworm's Bite, if I do that pairing, I'm in a real bad position. And so if, my best of 3 ends up where I'm twice longboarded versus 1 wide, then I am up against it. You can practice that. Or if you say, like, that's kind of a write-off, let me figure out how to maximize the wide board situation. Like, let me figure out how to push that from like a, maybe a 55-45 to my advantage, with enough reps, I can get to 60-40 to my advantage. And just like, that's the nature of an event. We talked about it really early on. Like, you need some luck, like maybe to get through the event. It's not that you need to dodge Siren Eyes with Rhymeworm's Bite. You need to, at least when you play them, get the advantage on wide boards twice or something like that.
Yeah.
So figure out where the best investment in your time is, and get some reps in that. And the ideal situation is that both sides of that practice are getting something out of it.
For sure. I think then maybe the only part of the turn 0 stuff that we haven't talked about yet is token placement. This is a little bit of a difficult one to try and talk about here because there's just so many variability like pieces to this. So there are lots of good online resources for token placement. Monkey's Hex blog has a really good rundown of token placement if you want to go find that for an in-depth. But I will just say when you're thinking about token placement, there's sort of the two sides of it. There's either, do I want to try and have 3 in my territory, or am I trying to set up the hexes in such a way that I'm kind of denying good positions for my opponent? That's a gross oversimplification, but like, for simplicity's sake, it is easy to sort of say that's the bifurcation. Like, sure, are you placing these to disrupt, or are you placing these for your own advantage? And so if you're placing them for your advantage, you probably are trying to find places where you can put them where your opponent can't then like have counter placement. This is something they talk about like, this actually then reflects back to your board choice. There's boards that are called delta boards where you have like a triangle of places that you can put your objectives. And so you're trying to like find those positioning tricks so you can like make sure you have 3. And then when you're trying to be disruptive, you're trying to find like, where can I break my opponent's positioning? And sometimes this will make it so that you can even do that when you're trying to get 3 objectives, where you can kind of force your opponent's board to only have 2 because you place a weird one. And then they have to place one in your board anyway, which is just sort of a little bit of a strange change up that happened back in, oh God, I don't want to embarrass myself here, whichever season it was that made it so that we couldn't place them on the edge hexes anymore. When they pushed all the objectives closer to the center of the boards, it meant,
I believe that was Dire Chasm.
See, that's what I was thinking too, but I'm sure somebody would be like, "Excuse me, it was this."
I'm gonna lodge a vote for Harrow Deep, but
okay.
Harrow Deep also had the put everything face down, and so it was a little bit obscure.
Yeah, everything was very. Anyway,
the placement being like, do you want to secure your own safe objectives? And like, if your opponent is kind of doing the same thing, whether or not you need to disrupt that. And basically by placing the objective where it denies them a more optimal placement, is basically what Phil was saying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this comes down to like, there's that hierarchy of like knowing what you want to do. I mean, there's the very basic is like knowing the rules of the game. Right. Next step is knowing what you want to do. And then step beyond that is know what your opponent wants to do.
Right. And so like you can place one objective to disrupt and then you secure your own, like you can have it both ways.
And if you, as we're talking about, practice time and goals and all that sort of thing, if you don't know enough to counterplay, then don't worry about it. Just like place them in the way that most benefits you. And then if that was a mistake, if you gave your opponent too much of an advantage, then you're going to learn, if you are already at the stage where you had the ability to learn what your opponent's trying to do, and then you can also try to deny that, well, then that's another level. It's another layer you can put on there.
Yep.
So,
yeah. I think I'll just say this is one that I've seen a number of newer players run up against when they really are playing aggro warbands a lot. And they're like, well, I just don't really care about these at all. And I think a good sort of switch in mindset if you're in that position, is to think there's always going to be situations where somebody wants to stand on this. How can I make, like, if I don't want to stand on them, how can I make it the least appealing place to stand?
Sure.
And so,
I mean, yeah.
Placing it adjacent to a lethal, so it's a pain to get knocked back into.
Yeah.
like,
That's a real Beastgrave Direchasm
classic.
callback. Yeah. I mean, I'll give having played against Phil so many times and with his beloved Starblood Stalkers.
yeah.
For me, it is trying to avoid having an objective placed that is a perfect landing spot for Clacktrock. You know, like anytime I'm playing that matchup, I'm like, all right, I know Clacktrock is looking for that, you know, early game charge, and if he can do it onto an objective, he's doing double duty, where he's getting to get there and then maybe tank some hits. So like I want to try and block out so that he cannot put an objective in a spot that lets him do both those things. I'm going to make him make some hard choices. But that's a result of many reps into a player who is really comfortable with that warband. And so if you have the bandwidth to do that, cool. If you don't, then don't worry about it.
Yep. Absolutely.
And a lot of these concepts overlap, because when you say Clacktrock, I think Snurk.
Sure. Yeah. Totally.
Scary charging fighters.
Yeah. It's an interesting dichotomy, because like the Snurk player is like, I kind of want to miss this attack. And Clacktrock's like, I super want to hit this attack.
God,
like,
I want to hit this so bad.
I mean, I think that covers it. I think what we're talking about here is making the most of your practice time often means focusing on those turn 0 decisions, and that's token placement, mulliganing, board choice, deployment. And then, beyond that, it is getting comfortable with your warband and then getting comfortable with what matchups exist. I think that's the most of it that we'd really want to convey. I'm going to send it back around again. Is there anything else we really want to hit here before we get deeper, or before we start to wrap up?
I think that covers the actual tournament well, but I would speak a little bit to the logistics. Is it a one-day event where you don't need a hotel? Thinking ahead like that, bring in a friend, split the hotel costs, or flying, road tripping. Obviously, consider whether or not you can bring or pack food. Like when we roll to Adepticon, we bring a whole cooler, and that really saves a lot on the food costs. As long as they're charging for food, they can't exactly tell you can't bring your own food. But check with the venue first.
I think this is a super good thing, and we can spend a little time with this, looking over that. Like it's super easy to get focused into the games, but like the sleep and water and food things are like undeniably an important part of this, you know?
Yeah, because we had a great time at Nova, but we were kind of stunned a little. Maybe we're just from the Midwest and we're now on the East Coast, but we were a little stunned by some of the prices. But get a little resourceful, look around. There was a fantastic number of restaurants nearby, as well as this wonderful little hole-in-the-wall type mom and pop, grandma and grandpa, like convenience store, and they had awesome breakfast sandwiches. I always love shouting that place out.
Yeah, there is, there's a lot more to just playing the tournament than playing in a tournament. And I think another thing that I've obviously experienced, but I've heard other people say as well, especially when they haven't played some of these bigger tournaments, multiple day tournaments, is that this is a complex game and it's going to like wear on your mind. Like it doesn't not always feel like playing a game is mentally taxing, but after you do it for 6 hours or however long the tournaments are, you tend to get to the end of the day and are just kind of like, I'm brain dead. I am not as sharp as I was when I first started playing at the start of the day. And being hydrated, having good sleep, like trying to like take breaks between rounds just to like get up and just move around a little bit can be the difference maker. And like, it's important stuff just always in life, I guess. But like, if we're really talking about how to perform well at a tournament, the same things apply. It's just not always something you think about. So
Sure.
If it's a place where you're not sure, like if there's going to be like a drinking fountain or a place to fill a water bottle, like make sure you bring your own.
Yeah.
Or like Brian said, if you don't know about the food situation, bring some stuff, have some snacks, whatever. It's those small things that sometimes get forgotten about, and then you're like, oh crap, I'm really thirsty. We're halfway through the day.
Sometimes your round before lunch goes long, and then suddenly you're panicking trying to figure out a quick food solution that will suffice in the time you have remaining.
Sure. If I'm trying to think of like universal things to apply, I would say another one is like, don't be scared of losing, right? Like,
oh, sure. Yeah.
Fear of taking losses can limit your ability to learn. Of our crew, the four of us, Skylar has a ticket to Worlds. If you're a new player, and this is, this is going to sound like some sort of backhanded thing. It's not. Actually, no, I'll back this up. So in my job, I'm a paramedic for the city of Madison, and I'll get a new paramedic with me, and they get really worried about starting IV. Like they're like, what if I miss it? And what I tell them is like, I have missed more IVs. I've failed to start more IVs than you even attempted. And you learn from all of those. And if you're too scared to miss, if you're too scared to take that L, well, then you're too scared to learn. If you're that applies to, if you're going out for your league night or your pickup night, if you're only going to play people that you can beat, well, you're not going to get challenged. You're not going to get that win. You're not going to learn how you need to push yourself to get that win. So don't be scared of losing, be it at your practice or even at your event, because anything you lose at that event, you're going to use at your next one, or even in that very same one. I'll give you an example at LVO. I did not get a chance to play Derek a second time. However, what I learned from him in that first time before Jazz crushed my hopes and dreams in the semifinals, I really think I could have leveraged if I had managed to beat Jazz and make it into the finals. I felt like I really had a good shot at giving Derek a better go of it, and that's because I lost to him and I learned some things from that loss. So, if your pride is in a spot where you can't afford to take a loss at any time, well, you're just not going to learn enough to be able to get the win down the line.
For sure. I totally agree. You will always learn more from your losses. And I think it's good to realize that like you're going to lose. It's going to happen. Get used to that fact. And don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. It's a game. We're here to have fun. Losing isn't the end of the world. It's you'll have a better shot next time because of it. And to go along with that, let me rephrase. So no matter what happens in your game, regardless of outcome, if you win, whether you lost, if your dice were really cold, if your dice were really hot, be a gracious opponent. Be friendly and try. This is a little like, try not to like get in your head about anything in the game. Like, try to be present and fun, because you've probably, as a person, whether it's in gaming or just in life, you've probably ended up in situations with somebody who you can just tell they're not having any of it right now. And that's no fun. And you don't want that to be your tournament experience, whether for yourself or for your opponent. So it's not always easy, but try to be mindful of that when you're playing. And if stuff starts to go against you, try to shake it off and just, laugh it off. In some ways, just laughing about the bad luck parts of the game, or, oh, that was a dumb mistake that I made, rather than like being upset about it. Try to laugh at yourself about it, sort of sounds a little weird, but it will help you stay in a positive mindset rather than like getting stuck in like this negative spiral.
I can absolutely testify to this. This is absolutely correct. When we were at LVO, shout out to Sleek's Bowl, he was cheering his opponent's big moments, and that was fantastic. Yeah. It totally helped the energy in the room. And then at Adepticon, I was playing, and you know, my luck was waxing and waning, but it was at each end of the game when I was playing against George from Path to Glory. At each end of our games, we played 3. He finished with a double crit defense against my attack, and each time I just wow, and cheering that on like absolutely did help the positivity. It felt like it kept my mindset more relaxed in the games, even when we were going to game 3. And the third game, I was like, here comes the double crit, and he did, and we're just like, ah! It was just, and it was fantastic. Absolutely recommend that. It was a great point.
Fair enough. All right, gents, I'm going to pass it one more time around the horn. Does anybody have anything else they want to throw in for a timeless recommendation for somebody who's getting ready for an event? Phil, anything from you, sir?
I feel like we've covered it.
Brian, anything from you?
If you can't win the event, steal Skylar's ticket.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Dirty. For me, and this just comes into like not being afraid to take a loss. For me, it is hold yourself to your decisions. It's really easy to ask for a take back or to say, "Oh, I forgot this." Like if you notice that you missed a reaction window or you wish you did something else, Phil on this very podcast right here as we're recording said you learn more from your losses. Like let that lesson burn into you, you know,
sear it in with pain.
Exactly. Brian knows my Slanesh leanings here. You know, like let yourself learn from it. Because you don't want to be asking for charity from an opponent during an event, you know.
I have an example from Adepticon. I was playing against Jesse from the Northeast, and we were playing. I was absolutely like down on my luck in dice and cards, and I'm just like, this is a loss. Like I got to try and go to game 3. But I had a moment where I was like, ooh, do you mind if I do the hypnotize with Starefish? I think that would allow me to do something, but I don't think it's going to win me anything. He's like, you know, we kind of, you know, we were like a step beyond or whatever. So I was asking for a take backsies, and I was just like, I mean, you've got this game, you've got this. And like, I positioned the Starefish or moved the models, and he's like, I mean, I guess if you're confident, but I don't know, it's Ephelum. And I was like, he's not comfortable. I shouldn't do this. And so I put it back. I'm like, nope. You're right. We passed the moment. I'm just feeling desperate. I'm down on my luck here. I then went to win the game, and I would have felt awful if I had taken that opportunity. He would have absolutely thought less of me. I was like, nope, absolutely not. And God, I that alternate timeline, I would have felt like an absolute piece. But no, that was don't do the take backsies. There's a small window of opportunity immediately after and before any new information comes to light, but generally it's not going to feel good for one of the players.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, that tracks, everybody. I think we are going to wrap it up from there. Phil, do you want to take us through the outro here?
Sure.
Right.
If you would like to give us any feedback, or if you would like to, just get in touch with us with any thoughts that you have, you can always reach us at WTHcast on, I guess, X, formerly Twitter, or whatthehexcast@gmail.com. And if you'd rather have a more informal chat space, our Discord is always available. We have lots of folks in there all the time, and we are always in there. So it's a really great spot. If you'd like to check out anything else from the Mortal Realms, feel free to head on over to themortalrealms.com. That is the podcast group that we belong to, and they will absolutely be having a bunch of new content because AOS 4 has just come out. And we will likely have some cool new story content over there, which we'll see what happens when we get new releases for Underworlds, but may inform some new things that happen over in our game as well.
Yeah.
Coming up next, I don't know. We're in a bit of a lull right now in the world of Underworlds. We have our tournament coming up in about a month and a half, and we've got Nova coming up in a few more months. Well, I guess another month after that.
In July, we have the Tacoma U.S. Open. Will be the next large event. Goonhammer Open this weekend. But of course, the Tacoma. I imagine we might see something at the Tacoma Open. Would be when we get new news.
Yeah,
that'd be pretty great.
Gen Con's also nearby, and so there might just be a news event there. Probably not any sort of tournaments, but
they usually have reveals, especially for smaller box games, similar to Underworlds. But yeah,
absolutely. So to be determined, but we have a number of ideas of different things we could discuss. More evergreen content, more battle reports. We got a number of different things in the hopper. So
we are open to suggestions.
Yeah, if there's something you'd really like to see, that would also be really great. We're always open to feedback, but if you've just had this idea that you're just like sitting on going like, man, I really hope that somebody talks about this at some point.
Well, I mean,
let us know. We would be super happy to do so.
And this episode brought to you by Zach's recommendation.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
It's great in the sense that it helps focus what we want to cover, but it also just lets us know like these are the types of things that people are interested in, and these are the types of areas that people are trying to explore in the game, and there may not be enough out there for folks to consume right now. So that's the easiest way for us to know what to make content for y'all. Other than that, I believe we have a Flavitex quiz.
Oh, well, if you insist, then
I do.
This is where Davy's Slanesh leanings come out.
We'll see.
All right. Well, I will just say, because this was such a wide-ranging topic, I'm going to have to give you some clues to start. And this obviously this goes out to the listeners as well. This is a gambit. This is a gambit that Skylar would probably get if he was here, if that helps you at all.
Okay.
It's a quote that's unattributed, and it is ready for the coming assault.
Ready for action?
Whoa, that's great. It is this. I'm going to tell you, this is a gambit that is currently.
Or no, that's an objective.
No, ready for action is 100% a gambit.
It's
but
just
that's a relic gambit. This is a gambit that is currently legal in Championship and Nemesis play.
Yeah, I have a idea, but I can't think of the name of the card. I'm gonna.
If you can describe it, I'll give you credit.
How about I just look up the names of the cards? Would that be reasonable?
It's reasonable as long as you're disclosing the source of your answer. Ready for the coming assault. And I can tell you about the art. There is the Prince of Dust and a petitioner standing on a real decrepit looking tower.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, he thinks he's got it.
He does. He thinks he's got it.
Has Brian ever played this deck? I don't know if Brian's ever played this deck.
Maybe.
I'm dying right now.
What? I mean, go.
Yeah. He probably doesn't know the name, just like me.
I can't. I'm trying. It's not ready for anything.
There it is. Fearsome Fortress. +1 defense for each friendly fighter on a feature token.
I couldn't think of the name. I literally just got to the card name list in Underworldsdb to be like, what's the name? And then he said it. So there it is.
Well, there we go. Your recommended listening for this episode is Getting Ready to Get Down. It's by Josh Ritter from Sermon on the Rocks. And for What the Hex, I've been Davy.
I've been Phil.
I've been Brian.
Rhymeworm's Bite.
You got there.
All right, boys. How do we feel?
Sorry if I was bulldozing everybody.
You were not at all, man. It was really good to have you back on. I really enjoyed your perspective here. I think it was solid.
Yeah, so, I think the episode was good, and I think it was good that you remembered that Skylar gave us that note to include, because I didn't.
Same. Burn fakes, you and me, Phil.
Oh, we're still recording? Oh, no.
All right, I'm going to stop.